so that should be connected. Give me one sec. Got to do that whole testing phase. Testing. And awesome. Okay, so it's still 8:29, so I'm going to give it a little bit, but I just wanted to give people a second to hop on. Okay, let me just check. All right. But good morning, everyone, for anybody that's logging on a little bit early there. I hope everybody's doing well today, too. It's a little foggy this morning when I went outside. For in the birding world, just to kind of fill up some time as well, too, I don't know if anybody has noticed, but molting season has just started for quite a few of our birds that have finished nesting. So if you happen to notice any birds while you're out and about that are looking like they have a little bit of bedhead, that could very well be because they are getting their new feathers in as well too, which is a whole lot of fun. So keep an eye on that. You might have some bald-headed cardinals. That's completely normal, but that's always a lot of fun as well too. So I've got 8:30, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jolene. I'm a certified songbird feeding specialist with Wild Birds Unlimited of Concord, and today we will be talking about tanagers. Tanagers are really exciting as we only get them during the summer months here in the States. I really enjoy seeing them because they're that nice, bright flash of red that we usually only see from cardinals in our location. So to know that there's another bird that kind of has that style is always fun. If you guys have any questions, feel free to leave a comment. I'll be watching for that as we go on. But with that, we're going to kind of just jump right into it as well, too. So tanagers are still in the order Passeriformes, which includes all of our perching songbirds, so quite a few of the songbirds that we see at our feeders on a daily basis. And more specifically, they're in the family Theropidae, which includes pretty much all of the neotropic tanagers that we have. There's over 300 species in this family. And again, the neotropics is going to be like your Central and South America region as well, too. So of those 387 species, 4 can be found in the U.S. area, 5 in total for North America, and more specifically, for at least North Carolina, we get 2 that come in this area. So we have the summer tanager and the scarlet tanager as well. So we get both of these birds in the summertime. These birds are considered long-distance migrants because they do travel from one continent to another, and we'll look more at their maps in a second. And they do prefer more wooded habitat. And we'll talk more about those in a second as well, too. The oldest tanager that we kind of have records of are usually around 11 years old, but the scarlet tanager kind of peaks out at 11 years old and 11 months old as well, too. So when we look at the maps, once again, we've got the summer tanager and the scarlet tanager map. Because of our location in North Carolina, I'm going to primarily focus on the summer and the scarlet tanager. We'll mention the other 2 species a little bit, but that'll be who our focus is on. Thankfully, the summer tanager and the scarlet tanager have a pretty wide range throughout the states and a little bit up into Canada as well. So when reading these maps, we're going to take a look at the different colors and what they mean. The orange up here, or like the orangish color, that is their nesting range. So that's going to be where we have them in the summertime. So you'll see that they actually push up all the way into the states here. And then the yellow portion on both maps is their migratory range. So this is when people can possibly see them in the spring or the fall season as they travel from location to location as well too. This blue section is their wintering habitat. So you can see how far down south they push into South America as well too. So we get them from, in North Carolina anyways, we get them from April to September. Another interesting fact is the summer tanager, and we're actually going to go right up here for one more second. The summer tanager is actually a little bit more easily seen, or can be more widely distributed through North Carolina because they do prefer more open habitats. So they can work with more open forests and open woodlands. It doesn't have to be super dense forest in that kind of sense. Meanwhile, the scarlet tanager does prefer more heavily wooded areas or more uninterrupted wood. So if there's any fragmented habitat, you're not really going to find a scarlet tanager there. So basically, if it's interrupted by suburban areas or highways or anything like that, he's not going to be as interested. So you'll notice that for the scarlet tanager map, we only get him for like the more western you go into North Carolina is where you're going to find the scarlet tanager. So more closer to the mountains and everything like that as well too. So when it comes to identification, again, the shape of these birds is a little bit more specific. These birds are medium sized, so they actually are pretty similar in size to the cardinal. They do have a larger head and a bigger body, so they're kind of bulky or a little bit more sturdy looking. They're not kind of, if you've ever seen a mockingbird, sometimes they look a little bit dainty in regards to head shape and body shape and all that kind of stuff. So these guys have a stockier build. They do have a blunt-tipped bill. It's kind of in between like a cardinal and a wren, okay? So cardinals have large, bulky bills that are very short and good for crushing seed, while wrens have that long, thinner bill, right? So this is kind of somewhere in between that works really well for their diet. And their tail isn't exceptionally long like a mockingbird. It actually fits their body size pretty well. It's not super short or super long, but it is notched at the bottom too. So the two pictures that we have here are our summer tanager male and our summer tanager female. You'll notice that they both look very different, and this is a case of sexual dimorphism, where the male and the female have different colorations, so it's very obvious to see who is who. Your males for a lot of tanager species, or at least the 4 that we get here, do usually showcase some style of red, while the females are usually more of a yellow or green tinted coloration. Between the two species that we have, they do have very distinctive songs and calls. Again, during nesting season, we're likely to hear both their song and their call, which is a lot of fun too. So oftentimes these songs do sound very similar to robin songs. We're going to look over the summer tanager and whew, you know how it's hard to talk some mornings. So we'll be talking about the songs first. So both of these birds do have a tendency to sound very similar to robins, with the summer tanager being a little bit quicker, but also having a slightly longer song, while the scarlet tanager has a slight, I'd say like a buzz or a rasp, and it's a little bit shorter as well too. So when we look at the summer tanager song, it's kind of in sets of 2 as it moves back and forth. We're going to go with that one time. While the scarlet tanager song is a little bit shorter, and it kind of has that buzzing sound to it. So robins, when they sing, are pretty consistent and move pretty rapidly. Both of these birds kind of have pauses in between their notes, right? Now, when it comes to their calls, the summer tanager call is exactly what it sounds like in lettering. It's kind of a pitty-tuck kind of noise, or at least I'm probably getting the alliteration wrong, but it sounds like this. Pitty-tuck. So this one, you can usually tell right away what it sounds like. And they do it pretty consistently if they're in the area. So you'll be able to hear it more than once and kind of get that idea down of what it sounds like. While the scarlet tanager has more of a, again with that kind of buzzing sound, a chick brr. So in that case, the second note is a little bit longer. But thankfully, both of these species have more distinctive songs and calls. Because again, some calls can just sound like a chip, and it can be very hard to distinguish as well. So that's always an interesting thing to kind of keep note of, because chances are you will hear these birds before you see them. If you hear either of these sounds, you're going to want to look up, because these birds like to travel through the forest canopy, and you know, all things considered, despite being a very bright red, it can be very hard to keep track of these birds as they're traveling. So like I said, thankfully they talk a lot, so while you're looking for them, you'll be able to tell and hear that they're still in the area. But they are a lot of fun to kind of find, and when you do, it is so worth it. So when it comes to the identification of other species, we're going to take note that they all have very similar beak shapes, the head shapes, and the tails are very similar because, again, they're all in the same family. So that shape is important to remember when you're trying to identify these birds. So, of course, we have the scarlet tanager, and for those that are out west, there is also the western tanager. Between your scarlet and the summer tanager, you can tell, I'm going to go back one more slide, that the summer tanager does not have black wings. The wings are a little bit darker in color, but your scarlet does have those nice deep black wings there. Even the even the Scarlet Tanager female has a deeper coloration on the wings and kind of the back as well. So that's kind of your distinctive focus on those, both the male and the female. The Western Tanager is interesting because the male does not have as much red compared to the other two that we've talked about, but he does have a nice splash of red right on his face too. Other than the yellow, even though he does have the black wings as well, he does have a wing bar that goes right through. So he's still a little bit different from the Scarlet Tanager in that regard as well. And even the Western Tanager female also has those wing bars. There is one more species of tanager that is found in North America, at least in the United States as well too, North America as well, and that is the hepatic tanager, but it's got a very small range in like Texas and some of the surrounding states. Looks very similar to the summer tanager, except has some more buff kind of colorations in the brown as well too. Now, one thing I do want to point out is for the Scarlet Tanager and the Western Tanager, they do not keep those bright red colors all throughout the year. We're not going to run across them in this plumage, but it is always something I like to mention. So the Scarlet Tanager, when they do molt in the fall, they actually lose all that bright red coloration, and they get it back the next molting season right before nesting as well. Same with the Western Tanager. While he looks very similar, he loses that patch of red that's up by the face and the feathers up there as well too. So I always like to point that out because it's interesting to see how much these birds can change in their wintering season versus their nesting season as well. Now, they don't get those nice bright red colors all on their own. They do need a little bit of help. So for a lot of birds, there's two different ways to get the colors that they do. First off is the structure of the feather. So we've talked a little bit about this with iridescence in some birds like hummingbirds or doves or grackles, right? On the other hand, there's pigmentation that is automatically developed in the body as it is. Well, this red coloration actually isn't a pigment that the body develops on its own. Most of the time, the pigmentations the body can produce can include yellows, browns, and some other colors as well. But the red is a little bit different. They get this pigmentation from their food. So however bright red they are the next season depends entirely on the insects and the fruit that they eat. So if they eat a lot of good insects and fruit that year, they're going to have a lot of bright red feathers to show off for the next season. But if the options aren't as great and they look a little bit more dull the next season, you can tell that their food options weren't as great either. So that actually does a lot for these birds and does make a difference. So the territory they have shows off the type of food options that they have as well too, just from how their feathers look as well, which is really interesting. Cardinals have this same effect. They have to eat certain foods to get the colors that they do as well. So these birds do primarily eat a lot of insects and fruit, like we kind of mentioned. They'll pick the prey from leaves and branches and even do some fly catching. So they'll kind of just hover a little bit, snatch the food, and head back to their branch as well. So it's a very fun behavior to watch as well too. So we've got some that's going for cicada as well, which is always interesting when it's that much larger. Their beak is really good to kind of break down the exoskeleton on these heavier duty insects as well. So when it comes to nesting season, we've kind of talked about how that's when we get them during this time of year. The males actually arrive before the females, so you shouldn't be surprised to see those bright red birds first. They kind of set up their territory so that they have it set and ready to go by the time the females arrive. They can be pretty territorial amongst themselves, their own species, as well as other species of birds, so that is not unsurprising to see. And when they are trying to attract the female in courtship, they'll usually show off those red feathers or offer some food items in return as well. When they do finally pick a partner, these birds are monogamous through their nesting season, so they'll stay with one partner for the duration of that year. Once wintering comes around, they might split up and pick a different partner in the next season, or they could stick with the one they have. It kind of depends on the pair, of course. So once they pick their pair, the female starts to work on building the nest as well and starts gathering materials. they make an open cup nest that's actually pretty flimsy. It takes anywhere from 3 to 5 days to make, but sometimes, depending on how loosely woven it is, you can see like the eggs through the bottom as well. So it does the job, well structured, but it's kind of loose overall, which is interesting. And they do use a lot of dried grasses and vegetation. They'll basically, for certain birds, they'll kind of like stuff it in and kind of shove their body in to kind of form the nest around them as well too. Certain tanagers have different styles of building as well in regards to how it looks at the end. So summer tanagers sometimes have the the plant material hanging over the nest, so it looks a little bit messier in comparison to other species. While your scarlet tanagers, while they do like more uninterrupted forest areas, they do prefer an open area underneath their nesting setup so that they can have easy exit and entry points as well too. So it's interesting in that regard. But the fun thing is, because these birds kind of nest a little bit higher up, it's harder to get certain photos of the eggs and the young as well too. So it's kind of limited information on that regard as well, which has been interesting. All right. And one thing I forgot to mention as well too, the summer tanager, like we mentioned in their range, goes all the way from the East Coast to a good portion of the western part of the US. So actually they do have 3 different subspecies. A subspecies is basically when it's the same species, but due to geographical distribution or habitat style, they have slight differences as well too. So you can see a summer tanager over in the western area that looks a little bit different compared to the eastern tanagers in that location, which is really interesting. So you might notice some slightly different nesting habitats depending on where these tanagers are from too, which is, I find that always curious. I think that's always a good time. So when they've built the nest, these birds can have anywhere from 1 to 2 broods with anywhere from 3 to 4 eggs. So it depends on how successful they are and what kind of food is available for them to kind of maintain their young as well too. When the eggs are laid, they're a pale blue-green colors with speckles or spotting of brown or chestnut kind of coloration. The summer tanagers actually have larger speckles in comparison to the scarlet as well too. But they look very similar. So once they lay all the eggs, then the incubation period starts, and that's anywhere from 11 to 12 days, so a little less than 2 weeks. And once those eggs hatch, they are altricial young, which basically means the young are blind, naked, and defenseless and require the parental care to continue growing, in comparison to ducks that can basically get up and walk and go after the first day. Of course, they still follow their mom, but you get the idea. So in this picture on the right here, you can see little mouths peeking up from the nest to get fed as well too, which is always fun. So once they hatch, then the parents do a lot of heavy-duty care for the nesting period in anywhere from 8 to 12 days. So these birds, the interesting thing is they actually leave the nest a lot faster than, for example, like a bluebird or a chickadee. It takes them a little over, I think the overall process is about oh my goodness. Again, like I said, the morning's been something fun, right? So again, the incubation is a little less than 2 weeks. And then of course you got nesting, which is also a little less than 2 weeks. But overall, they can sometimes leave the nest in about 3.5 weeks, depending on how fast they grow. And for a lot of other songbirds that we have, sometimes it takes 4 or 4.5 weeks, depending on how they're doing. So even though they leave a little bit early, those young fledglings half the time may be flying a little bit, but they're going to be hopping around a lot. So the parents will actually follow them around and feed them as they're on the move, which is always interesting as well. So here we've got a really good shot of a fledgling, and since we're still in nesting season, it's always good to remind ourselves fledglings are capable of moving around outside of the nest. They usually have no tail or very little tail. Their wings are not fully grown yet, and they do have a lot of fuzzy tufts on their head feathers as well. This is kind of normal behavior for them to be moving around. Usually the parents are nearby, so don't panic if you see one of these birds just kind of bright, alert, and responsive on its own. And this is just fledglings in general. So feel free to keep an eye on them, but unless you see any obvious injuries, I would not interfere with what they're doing on their daily basis as well. So when they finally grow out all of their feathers for that season, they're going to look very similar to the adult females of that species, right? So usually they're going to be that yellow-green kind of coloration at some point. As the year continues and they kind of continue to molt and get their adult feathers, the male tanagers still have a little bit more work to do. So in this case, as they get to like their first year, they get their real adult plumage in. So it is not uncommon to see these birds that have a little bit of patchy coloration in regards to red colors and the yellow colors as well too. So even with the Scarlet Tanager, you can see they have those black wings, but they still have some of those yellow feathers that are still coming in. So this can be very common with some species, just in birds in general. Some birds get their adult plumage instantly, while others have to wait through that first year before the males at least get their complete adult plumage in. So I always find that to be a fun fact, and these are some of my favorite birds to see traveling through migration as well too. So keep an eye out for those. Once again, they'll be leaving in September, so we've still got a little bit of time with them, which is always fun too. So if you live in a more wooded area, there are definitely chances that you have some tanagers in your yard. So things that they really enjoy include things such as suet, mealworms, or you can even offer fruit options like jelly or oranges, depending on what you want to do. Jelly or oranges or fruit options in general can be a little bit more high maintenance just because you don't want it to go moldy, and it's important to kind of keep an eye and make sure, yeah, it's not going bad pretty much in that regard. These birds can be pretty good at kind of clinging as well as perching. So if you've got something that's got a decent perch, they're good with that too. I've sometimes seen them cling to peanut feeders as well, so they can hold on to mesh too. If none of those food options are up to you or like something that you enjoy, feel free to offer a water source, as that is something any bird can use. Considering like you can have raptors or cedar waxwings or even your tanagers visit your water that you wouldn't really have visit your feeders otherwise, right? So never underestimate a good water source, especially in the heat that we have right now. Along with that too, if you're not really much of a bird feeding person in general and like to stick to natural resources, make sure check out what plants you have in your yard. Native plants are a very good option for a few different reasons. Like we mentioned, these birds are primarily insect eaters, so depending on what plants you have, those plants can host a variety of insects that the tanagers would go for. So certain fruit trees like cherry or plum are host to a variety of caterpillar species that these birds absolutely love. Not only that, but they'll definitely take advantage of the fruit that's there as well too. And of course, berries like blueberry, raspberry, blackberry are a great option to offer as well for a variety of wildlife in your yard too. So those are all different things to consider depending on where you live as well. Again, they do enjoy that wooded habitat, so if you live in a more open area, I think it's time to go on a bird walk. Maybe check out your local area. For example, North Carolina has a website, which I didn't think to write it down, called NC Birding Trail, which basically allows you to check out different areas in the throughout North Carolina that are great for bird watching. So take a buddy, go out there and kind of take a look around and see what birds you can find, because you never know who you might be missing by just sticking in your own yard as well too. But you can always get a lot of fun in your own yard as well. So to each his own, just stuff to consider there as well. So with that said, that's kind of pretty much all I have to say on the tanagers for now. Just as a major thing to point out, if you want to learn more about these birds or others, allaboutbirds.org is a great resource to kind of check out to learn more about life history, their songs, calls, and photo identification. If you want to see more videos or audio or photos of these specific birds, the Macaulay Library at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology is a great scientific resource that basically has a huge catalog of many different birds found throughout the world that you can kind of check out and get a little bit more information on any bird species that you're curious about as well too. So if you're coming in to shop today, we do have a $5 off a $25 purchase of more with the coupon code Tanager. That one's only available today, but feel free to use that if you're coming in store or if you want to place a phone order as well too. We'll be having a second viewing of this presentation in store at 11 a.m. If you know anybody in the area, oh my goodness, in the area that might be interested as well. So I hope you guys had a lot of fun learning about the tanagers. I'll be honest, this was a bit self-indulgent because I do enjoy these birds and seeing them when I get the chance. And it may not be a bird that people are used to hearing about. So the more knowledge that everybody has, the more they can always check out their yards and see what's going on as well too. So thank you guys very much for joining me today. I hope you have a wonderful weekend and have a great time. I will see you the next time. Have a good one.